We're live.
Good evening. It is 7 p.m. and time to call the Monday, October 4th, 2021 meeting of the Westfield, Washington Township Advisory Plan Commission to order. Would staff please note the presence of a quorum?
Ms. Berkman? Mr. Deck?
Here.
Mr. Horke?
Here.
Mr. Johns?
Here.
Dr. Kelleher?
Here.
Mr. Maui?
Here.
Mr. McCarty?
Here.
Mr. Schmitz?
Here.
Ms. Boljaric? We have a quorum.
Thank you. First item, as always, is approval of the minutes of our previous meeting of September 20th, 2021. Does anybody have any questions, comments, or are we ready for a motion to approve these minutes?
Make a motion to approve.
Motion from Victor McCarty,
I'll second that.
second from Andre Maui. Staff, please call the roll.
Mr. Deck?
Yes.
Mr. Horke?
Yes.
Mr. Johns?
Yes.
Dr. Kelleher?
Yes.
Mr. Maui?
Yes.
Mr. McCarty?
Yes.
Mr. Schmitz?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. If staff would now please review the rules and procedures for tonight's meeting, which includes items both for our approval as well as public hearings.
Yes, for public hearing items, the meeting will have the following structure. The department will summarize the petition, then the petitioner will be given up to 15 minutes to present to the Plan Commission. The president will open a public hearing, and individuals will be given 3 minutes to speak. The public hearing will be closed when all interested members of the audience have had a chance to be heard, and any emails received during the meeting have been provided to the Plan Commission members. The petitioner will then have a chance to respond to comments, and the Plan Commission will follow with any comments, questions, or concerns regarding the petition. For non-public hearing items, the department will summarize the petition and highlight any changes or modifications since the item was last before the Plan Commission. The department will also describe what action, if any, is necessary to be taken. The petitioner will be given up to 15 minutes to present any changes, and then the Plan Commission will act upon the petition. For our general rules of conduct, we ask that you please not disrupt the proceedings in any way. If you need to have a private discussion, we ask that you please quietly exit the room. Please silence your devices at this time, and again, if you must answer them, please quietly exit the room. If you are attending in person and wish to speak in regard to a petition scheduled for a public hearing, then please fill out a yellow card, which are available in the back of the room and up front by the podium, and bring it to me prior to the presentation of that petition. During your comments, please state your name and address into the microphone for the record, and we may ask that you not repeat previously stated comments. Your presentation will be timed, and you'll be advised when there's approximately 30 seconds remaining. If you are not attending in person and you would like to comment on a petition, please send an email to planners@westfield.in.gov with the petition name or number included in the subject line. Those comments will be forwarded on to Plan Commission members and the petitioner. We would also like to remind everyone to please speak directly into the microphone so that your comments can be put onto the record. If you are speaking in person, please make sure the microphone is on at the podium as indicated by a green light. And if you are on the call, please mute your microphone when you are not speaking. Thank you.
Thank you. We have 3 items ready for approval on tonight's consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve this consent agenda?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented with recommendations by staff.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second the motion.
Thank you. We have a motion by Dr. Kelleher, seconded by Matt Deck. If staff would please call the roll.
Mr. Deck?
Yes.
Mr. Horke?
Yes.
Mr. Johns?
Yes.
Dr. Kelleher?
Yes.
Mr. Maui?
Yes.
Mr. McCarty?
Yes.
Mr. Schmitz?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Moving on to the one item of business that is in front of us, Urban Apples PUD 2108-PUD-22. This is in front of us for a recommendation to City Council.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the Commission. Pam Howard with the Community Development Department. Before you this evening, we have a proposed new PUD district to be known as Urban Apples. This 24-acre site is located at 18326 Spring Mill Road and is currently zoned the AGSF1 district with an approved variance for wine processing. The proposed ordinance contains standards to accommodate the expansion of the existing use to a larger agritourism-based use. This item did receive a public hearing on August 2nd. Since that time, several changes have been made to the text of the agenda as well as the exhibits. Details of those are provided in the staff report as well as the updated project narrative, and the petitioner will also go into further details in his presentation. If the Plan Commission is satisfied with the petition, we recommend forwarding your recommendation to the City Council this evening. At this time, I have Matt Pleasant here who would like to, Matt Skelton, who would like to make a presentation, after which both he and I are available for questions. Thank you.
But I'm sure Matt Skelton is very pleasant.
That's a first, yeah. Okay, well, thank you, members of the commission. For your record, my name is Matt Skelton with Churchill and Antrim, with offices at 116 North Union Street here in Westfield. With me this evening from the Urban Apples team is Noah Herron, Michael Hayner, and Mark Rupenthal, who are all present here in the audience this evening. As Pam noted, the Urban Apples proposal is a proposed agritourism destination. In the staff report, the previous staff report, and at the Plan Commission meeting for our hearing, there were some suggestions that some modifications, reorganization to the PUD ordinance itself be considered. And since our Plan Commission public hearing, we've spent quite a bit of time with the staff and have done exactly that. And I'll quickly highlight those changes. And Mr. President, you can advise me. We did receive the comments that were forwarded to us from Mrs. Berkman and Mrs. Spaljarek today. And I'm happy to cover those items in hopes that it'll address questions that the commission may have, or I'm happy to just respond to questions that
Go ahead and proceed with
Okay, all right,
addressing
thank you.
those if you already have that
Sure.
kind of incorporated into your prepared remarks.
So what you will notice, pardon me, in the PUD ordinance, there are a number of definitions, several of the definitions that were included in the original ordinance, and these can all clearly be seen in the red line that's before you this evening, have been eliminated. In working with the staff and reorganizing the permitted use table and related standards, there really wasn't a need for many of the definitions after that, and I think many of you had already reached that conclusion as well. So those have been eliminated. There's really only a few left in the ordinance that are really needed to make sense of some of the other standards. The concept plan has been revised quite a bit. In some ways, it's more information. In some ways, it's simplified a little bit. But you'll notice there's a lot more detail on the concept plan. We've worked with our civil engineer, and what you have before you is a 2-scale plan of the planned site improvements. What you had before was more of a conceptual or a schematic plan, which worked the way we had the ordinance set up then, but the ordinance has been refined, and this detail is required, and I'll highlight some of the reasons why. In addition to other things, the concept plan is now, the site is actually required in the PUD ordinance to develop in substantial compliance with the concept plan. So where there might have been a little guesswork on the front end, there really isn't any anymore. The improvements that are shown are essentially where they are and what they will be. One notable change, the number of areas has been reduced from, I believe it was 7, now into 4. And working with the staff and reworking the permitted use table, several of the areas, the more passive areas on the site, really, there wasn't enough difference in how they would ultimately be used to really need to distinguish among them. So they've all been included in what is referred to as the lawn area. I've already highlighted the permitted use simplifications. Most of the uses, almost all of the uses that would be planned for this property are included within the agritourism use as defined in the city's UDO. So if you'll remember last time, we had slightly modified that definition. That's no longer the case. So we default to the city's definition. Architectural standards have been significantly enhanced in the PUD ordinance. There are several items that have changed, but probably the most noteworthy is our architect has had an opportunity to develop two-scale architectural elevations that show the improvements to be made in the vine area and also the cidery area. There are some renderings here that you're seeing, but there's also two-scale elevations that will allow the staff to do what it needs to do when reviewing plans. Those have all been incorporated into the ordinance, and the ordinance requires that these buildings be built in substantial compliance with these standards, with these exhibits, I mean. As you'll note, we did incorporate masonry elements, architectural lighting, which consists mostly or exclusively of downlighting, which is gooseneck downlighting, which will create a really neat effect in the evening, we believe. And just to sum things up, the total of the improvements that are shown on the concept plan will be in excess of $10 million. So I think there was some comparison of us to the West Fork whiskey proposal, and that's the comparable price. It's the same price that they thought it would take to build what they're building. By conducting this more refined site planning exercise, we were able to identify a couple of landscaping standards that were going to be inconvenient, if not difficult to comply with. And so we've addressed those in the ordinance. Probably the most noteworthy one, and the one that we received some comments on, was the delay of applicability of foundation plantings, and this is specifically for portions of buildings that we expect to add on to. And there is a time limit in the PUD that requires the improvements to be made within a 5-year period, or else we have to install the landscaping. This is merely to prevent the need to rip out perfectly good landscaping that we expect to make these improvements easily within that 5-year period. If we don't, so be it. This is the exact same standard that was used and imposed upon the gymnastics facility for Grand Park on 186th Street, and staff suggested that might be an alternative that you folks have seen before, at least, if that makes sense. And then we have incorporated a mound requirement. This is to be located immediately east of the pond showed on the concept plan. And you can see it's kind of a curvilinear shape. Will be extensively landscaped. Those requirements are included in the PUD ordinance. And I forget which it is, but it's like it's about the most extensive buffer planting requirement that the city has. We did communicate with our future neighbor to the west and to the south, Silverthorne Homes. They submitted a letter of support for this proposal. It's in your materials, it's posted on your website, but not only do they express their support for the Urban Apples proposal, but they also regard this proposal as an amenity for their future residents, and they're looking forward to see this built out, and they've been really good to work with. We've stayed in close contact with them through this process. We were able to, in developing these building elevations that are included in your materials, also identify some opportunities to, if for lack of a better word, garnish some of the more open, unbroken planes on the buildings with some wall signage. These wall signs that are shown are not really needed for commercial exposure or anything like that. They were merely intended to break up a plane And that's what we believe, in fact, they do. So typically, sign standards aren't done that way. We try to figure out how to make the building look good, and then we figure out what we did, and then we put forth a standard that memorializes that. And that was our process. And then lastly, parking. We had some comments when we were last before you about how do we make sure we're providing enough parking so we don't end up with a confusing situation where we're underparked. Well, if you'll see the concept plan, I'm sorry to keep making you volleying back and forth, but the concept plan, there's an extensive amount of parking able to be accommodated on the site. It is not our intention to build all the parking that is shown on this concept plan, although if the planning director determines that it's warranted, then we have to. But this was an exercise to show if we had to, how we could easily accommodate. I think there's over 700 to 750 parking spaces on the entire site. And just to be clear, one thing I didn't highlight before, all of the parking areas except the area that's shown right here where it's being circled will just be traditional, normal parking facilities. In the previous example of the ordinance, it was really just there were different standards within 200 feet of Spring Mill Road, and that just, it wasn't necessary. All the parking areas and vehicular use areas will be normal hard surface compliant parking spaces. The only ones that are proposed to be a little bit different are the seasonal parking spaces, which are intended to be, it will be a dustless gravel material and lawn area. And the way the PUD has been reworked, it gives the planning director pretty much unbridled discretion to determine the adequacy of parking that's being provided, and also when it gets constructed. So, and we're happy with that. So, those are the highlighted changes from before, and I will try to proactively here address some of the things that were raised in emails that were forwarded to us today. And if there was any other questions after that, I'm happy to try to address them. But there was one question about why do we have timeframes in the ordinance for improvement of the Vine building and also the cidery building. If you'll recall, the Vine building is the one approved for wine production today. It has a year for completion. There was an implication that somehow the public would be using these facilities while they were being completed, and then we had a year to complete them. That's not at all the case. There will need to be permits in hand, work completed, certificates of occupancy prior to any public occupancy. And that by operation of law, that's not because we're saying we'll do that. I mean, that's true anyway. And so we will, and that is true for the cidery building as well. The reason for those timeframes is merely to explain where the Vine building will be the first priority, the cidery building will come next, and we intend to, we don't intend, we must, in order to comply, finish the work on the Vine building in 1 year and the cidery building in 2 years. There was some question about glass, metal, or polyplastic exterior being used for a greenhouse, and really there aren't any other options. That's what greenhouses are made out of in order to let the light through. I think I'm anticipating that one of the apprehensions might have been polyplastic exterior, and people probably are envisioning hoop houses or something with soft walls. These are permanent structures. The polyplastic exterior is it's a plate. It's a plastic, not just a membrane, but it's like glass. It's like a glass-like product. There was a question about whether we have maximum sizes for the greenhouses, and we did not insert or really see a need to put a maximum size for a greenhouse. You're kind of limited in the seeds area to the size of the seeds area. If there's a a public reason why that should be, there should be a limitation on that, we're happy to consider it. It just wasn't a thing that occurred to us. There was a comment made that the trees in the lower left portion, I do have a pointer I could be using. Yeah, in this area here, are not labeled as orchard, and that was just an omission. That is the intention, though they will be planted whether the ordinance requires it or not, but this will be the orchard, and we're happy to label it as such. There was a suggestion that we might consider some additional architectural enhancements. And we are happy to receive any input. I know that we get into the art part of architecture, then it gets a little subjective. We've tried to put our best foot forward and show the modifications that we are planning to make by incorporating masonry and cupolas and lighting fixtures and committing to building materials and timelines. And if that's not enough, then we just need to know what is, and we'll figure it out. And then there was a suggestion that we might put forth a landscaping entrance design, and we have every intention of having one at least here. The standards that are included in the PUD ordinance certainly accommodate us doing that, but we had not intended to actually do the design of it until we get to the detailed development plan phase. If that's something that is important in order for the Plan Commission to feel comfortable forwarding us with a favorable recommendation, we're happy to consider doing that before you take action. There were some questions about the general screening standards not applying to the vine or cidery areas, and I've racked my brain and I just can't figure out where that's coming from. I think we have buffering standards that are required along the perimeter of the entire site, and the cidery and vine areas are required to comply with the same lot landscaping standards that every other commercial use would. The difference is probably the foundation planting item that I already talked about. I'm guessing that's where it came from. I'm not exactly sure. We received I talked about foundation plantings. There's a comment about too much wall signage, and I tried to explain the rationale. We don't need it all, but I think the buildings look better with it. We have a 24-acre site. We proposed 2 monument signs. It is not uncommon for a site this size to have many signs on it if they were different lots, but this is kind of unique in that it's one large lot. We do have 2 public entrances, and we would like to sign both of them. We think there's value in that. There's a question about dumpster locations. They'll go, our plan is to comply with the UDO, so the UDO would not allow them to be constructed in a front yard. There's other requirements as well. There was some apprehension about allowing food trucks, and one of the comments that I would just suggest to you, the only area that a food truck would be permitted would be internal to the site back here. There's no intention for them to be permitted anywhere where they would have commercial exposure, if you will. They're only permitted to vend within the site. And for those of you who have been to, say, the Junction Brewing Company or some other place like that, having a food truck around just kind of adds to the festive nature of it. I don't know that it really takes away from other uses. The intention of the food truck ordinance was designed to prevent people from unfairly competing with sticks and bricks restaurants. Well, these people are being vended to from within the development. They've already chosen to come here. So I don't know if it's really taken away or not. There was a question about no requirements for loading berths, and the requirement loading berth, it's a minimum requirement for the number of loading berths. It's a standard that typically comes into play when somebody's building like a spec industrial building and making sure that they're providing enough loading berths for the tenant spaces that they have to avoid, construction later. And we know what we're doing. We know what the use is. It's all owned by the same affiliates. And so we probably have more of an interest in making sure we have enough loading berths than a city would. So if that's we can probably get rid of that standard if we had to, but it just it seems superfluous to be applied to us. There were several questions about how will animals be kept, where will they be kept, what experience is there with the caring for animals, and I'll try to sum all those up in a couple of comments. The owner, Mr. Heron, one of the owners, was raised on a farm, very familiar with raising farm animals, taking care of farm animals, if that matters. But I think most importantly, we have consulted with Connor Prairie. We understand their safety protocols, how they operate, their surveillance protocols, their care protocols, and we're going to mimic and do exactly what they do. To a large extent, animals adjust to activity, and to the extent that they don't, then they need to have places they can go where people aren't. And so we're going to do those things. So, but we will have surveillance systems that protect the animals to keep them from being, accessed after hours and things of that nature. So there's a question about where equipment will be housed, like maintenance equipment, and it will either be maintained in one of the existing or one of the structures shown on the concept plan, or it will be in an accessory building. Accessory buildings under the PUD, if you saw it, are required to mimic the architecture of the other improvements on the real estate. But we could have one or two accessory buildings that would provide opportunity for storage of maintenance equipment. There was a concern about limiting hours of operation and hours of the day for noise-producing events. And I'll try to cover all this at once, but the city has restrictions on not only how much noise can be made, but when noise can be made, and we're not proposing to vary from any of that. We have to comply with the same standards that I do in my own backyard. And so it's not different from use to use. That's one standard that applies citywide. The difference is this facility is actually designed for that purpose, and that's why there's a 2,000-foot distance between the music area here and the nearest home to the northeast. We've designed this to be an increased buffer, but it doesn't really matter. All those things don't matter. There are rules about how loud this can be and when there can be noise, independent of any improvement on the property. So if there's a violation of that, guess what? You lose your rights. You don't get to keep doing it. So I'll just stop there, and if anybody has any other questions about that, I'm happy to try to respond. There's a question about how do we make sure we have enough restroom facilities in proximity, and I addressed this at the last meeting, but Chapter 29 of the International Plumbing Code actually deals with this. It dictates how many facilities you have to have. It even breaks it down like types of facilities per gender. It's very specific. So we have to comply with all those. It's kind of confusing if you read it from too close, but there's a provision in the PUD that talks about if the existing variance that applies to the property for the wine production facility is held to be valid at some point in the future, then this PUD ordinance evaporates, basically. That's what it says. And I think that's the city's way of protecting itself. It wasn't our idea to put that in the PUD ordinance. It's the city's way of protecting itself So if we ever tried to make a claim for whatever reason, I mean, if we've done our job, the variance should be baked into this PUD, so there should never be a reason to claim that the variance is intact. This says if we do, then the PUD goes away. I think it's a city protection. That's what it's for. There was a question about where the goat tower will be constructed. And honestly, right now, we don't even know if there will be one. If there is one, we've shown you what it will look like. And we will locate it in a manner that is consistent with the city's accessory building standards. And it's all, loop in all the comments I made before. It'll be done in a manner that is not only safe for animals, but also safe for people. So the good news is, in a situation like this, this is going to be a publicly accessible and occupied space. We'll be under very close scrutiny on how we care for these animals and how they're housed and what they look like. You cannot say that of a private farm necessarily. There could be things happening in somebody's private barn that are far worse than anything that could happen here. This will be a Facebook post for sure if something unfortunate were to happen on this site. Let's see. There was a question about whether there are height restrictions for accessory buildings. There are. It's in the Unified Development Ordinance. It's 18 feet. Are there materials requirements for accessory buildings? Yes, there are. It's in the PUD, and they have to be architecturally consistent with the other structures on the site. And I think there was one other one. I expect Mr. Maui to be interested in this one. This requires that there is an exception for non-conforming conditions present, landscaping screening exceptions for non-conforming conditions present in the vine area and the cidery area. Well, the reason for this is I'm not aware of any non-conformities that would prevent compliance in the cidery area. There could be, but I don't think there are. In the vine area, there certainly is, just because of the orientation of the loading areas, and they're already there, they're present. And so to the extent that there's a nonconformity on the site that prevents compliance, then we're asking not to comply. That's what that standard is. So with that, I'm gonna stop. I'm sorry, that was a lot longer than you probably wanted it to be. But I think I've addressed it. If there's anything I didn't hit, let me know. And then we would appreciate any input you'd like to provide on further refinements to building elevations and whether it's necessary for the Plan Commission determination to prepare the entrance exhibit that I mentioned. Thank you, and happy to respond.
Thank you. We'll go through commissioner comments. We'll start with Mike Johns tonight.
I've got several questions here. Do you have the time frame yet for the seed building?
I don't have a firm timeline, but I can try to get one if you want it.
Well, I just wonder, I mean, you've got a time frame for the vine building,
Yeah.
the cider building.
Well,
It would be helpful to.
Yeah, the purpose for those timelines is because I'm sure everybody's probably seen the buildings, but they're not pleasant to look at. I mean, they're not in great shape. They're going to be completely changed. And so the idea by putting the timeline on there is to not only make sure that that condition goes away, but also to make sure that we're showing that there's a definite timeline for compliance. Otherwise, I mean, if I were sitting in your shoes, I might think that this could go on for a long time. So I don't have a definite timeline, but I can speak with my client and find out when we think it would be. But I don't know. When we build it, you know what it's going to look like and what it's going to be.
Okay. Again, I think it would be helpful to have an idea of the size of the greenhouse that's going to be attached to that seed building.
Say that again.
It'd be helpful to have an idea of the size of the greenhouse.
Size.
Yeah, yeah. And I guess I was questioning the buildings themselves. I noticed that the Vine building has metal siding on it, and the cider building has wood barn siding on it. And is there an idea of why you switched from one to the other?
Well, so there is metal on the existing vines structure today, and some portions of that we will be able to recondition and keep. There are portions that are probably going to have to be taken down and resurfaced. And on the cidery barn, it's actually a wood constructed. I mean, it's actually a beautiful, not in great shape barn, but I think the idea is to restore it to how it was originally constructed. And so it's a wood construction now, and so the idea was to keep it that way and preserve it that way.
What siding material are you going to use on the seed building?
So it's required to mimic the vine building and its building materials, so there's just some architectural continuity in the corridor. I mean, that's the point. So when you drive past it, there will be thematic consistency among the materials used.
The mound, can you tell me how long the mound is going to be? I know it's 5 foot high.
Yeah.
And I saw the landscape requirements, but how long is it going to be?
So I'm not sure exactly how long it is, but that exhibit in the concept plan is actually to scale.
Okay.
I mean, it can be measured off, it can be independently verified. So if that distance is important, I can get it for you.
With respect to the farm animals,
Uh-huh.
I didn't see anywhere on the exhibit where they're going to be housed. What's your plans there?
So we don't know exactly where they're going to be housed right now. I think we plan to use the site first and then figure out where it makes sense to do that if we do that. That's the thinking. Right now, farm animals, of course, are permitted anywhere. It's agricultural ground. The idea would be to confine them in a place that's safe, that gives them the place to retreat that they will need to retreat if they want to get away from people or activity. But there are plenty of places on the site that could accommodate that type of use. It just hasn't been identified yet.
Yeah, I guess that's kind of a problem I have with the project is there may or may not be farm animals, there may or may not be a goat tower. It's somewhat, I think, open-ended. And I don't know if there's any way you can button that up at all.
Well, if it's important to you that we have them, we can commit to doing them. But they're accessory uses. They're not necessary for the operation of the orchard. So they're really just, if we can do it in a way that makes sense. I mean, we know how to do it, and we know the protocols that we need to adhere to in order to safely do it. We just haven't identified on the site where it's to be located. And frankly, I mean, it could change from time to time if on a site this size, I mean, theoretically, I mean, it's not that wishy-washy, but you could actually have them, you could have an area for some farm animals and then, the next year move it someplace else if it was stepped on too much by farm animals.
I guess in the project in general, first of all, I really would like to thank the petitioner for all the changes that you've made. I think this is a much superior proposal than what was initially brought forward. Okay. My problem with this project is really, I guess, what it's going to look like when you're done. And treating petitioners fairly. I know this is project, in my mind, this is very similar to the West Fork Whiskey project. And I mean, that too is an agriculture or agritourism type of a project. They came before this body and we were pretty specific and held them to some very high standards for construction. And I think we're getting away from that as we try to reuse the barns and metal buildings and pole barns that are on this site. And I wonder if we, as an APC, shouldn't be trying to hold to the standards that we've already set for other locations around Grand Park, which we all know is the hugest and largest investment that this city has made. So that in a nutshell is really my concern. So, and I don't know that there's anything you can really do about that. But
So that's beyond suggesting additional architectural enhancements. You want to tear down and a rebuild.
I'd like to see some different buildings. You know, and again, following kind of the standards that we've set with other petitioners in the area.
And just, I won't, I'll just suggest that this is the same level of investment as West Fork whiskey. It's almost exactly the same amount of investment. It's just a different use. This truly is agritourism. I think in looking at the West Fork whiskey, it was just a little bit, it was going to have some tourism qualities, but it also was set up to be an industrial use and reuse as well.
Yep. Those are my comments.
Thank you. Dave Schmitz?
I'd like to echo what Mike said about thanking the petitioner and really appreciate the simplification of the PUD, and it's much more manageable at this stage. I'm sure it's better for staff and it makes it a lot more readable from our perspective. With the concerns that several have echoed about or have mentioned about the Spring Mill corridor and the look architecturally, and from a landscaping perspective along Spring Mill corridor, did I understand you correctly that with respect to landscaping in particular, the standards will all be met except for the facades that are subject to expansion in the future? So you're complying with UDO from a landscaping perspective except for those areas?
Keep me honest here, Pam, but I think that's the case for the cidery area, the vine area, and the seeds area. So the ones with the vertical construction. Yes. There's one departure in the vines area. There were already an apple orchard, the beginning is of one planted along the corridor, so the external street landscaping in the area where those 3 rows of apple trees are shown, they are in substitution for that. So that's a departure. But yeah, the lot landscaping, I think is what you're talking about. Lot landscaping standards and foundation plantings, except for those sides where the building additions will be.
Okay, and the parking lot, the hard surface, those are hard surface lots by the cidery and by the seeds and by the vine. In those 3 sections, those are hard surface, UDO compliant landscaping and so forth, right?
Correct. The only areas that have different parking standards are located in the lawn.
Sure, okay. I think that's all I have for now.
Thank you. Matt Deck?
Would like to echo and thanking the petitioner and thanking Matt. I know you've been really busy since the last time we've met and put a lot of work and effort into this, and really appreciate that. This future business is really helping to create the identity for Westfield and helping to further cultivate our agritourism. And I mean, this is going to happen at some point. Very excited about it. I'm not going to pretend to have the same level of experience as some of my fellow commissioners with regards to the pages and pages that you received today. How hard do we push for that stuff? How hard do we just let stuff go? I'm not going to pretend to know. I just trust that you and the petitioner will continue to work with staff on making sure this project is as good and spot on as it can be. It was good to see the letter of recommendation from Silverthorne, a future neighbor. They're already on board. That's great. To echo your comments about the food truck, yeah, I can't see that competing with KFC or Sonic or anything like that. That's just good to have on the property for those that are already there. The only question I had, and this is back to the whole animal issue, and I don't think you have the answers because you don't know yet. Do you know roughly how many animals you're expecting on the property, and then how many staff members will be dedicated to taking care of those animals?
I don't know the answer to that. I mean, there aren't firm plans to, I mean, that's something we want to have the ability to do on the property because we think it would be a meaningful, interactive experience for the visiting public. But we don't have any immediate plans to do that, and we'll staff it the way we have to staff it. I mean, it doesn't require 24-hour attendance, but we will have 24-hour surveillance, and we will care for the animals on an as-needed basis, just like Conner Prairie does, with regular checkups and visits.
Wanted to echo Mike's comments on it, wanting it to look nice being in the Grand Park area, but I really feel like the changes you've already made, you're really getting to that point, and any further modifications will only enhance that. I think it'll be a great addition to the area. Those are my comments.
Thank you. Dr. Keller?
Oh, bear with me. I had several comments, but after listening to everybody talk and Matt give his presentation, I wrote down a lot more. I spent quite a while today talking with Pam, so a lot of the stuff that you explained, I'd already heard from Pam, which was helpful. Couple things, I'll try to keep it simple. The orchard needs to be labeled or put in the PUD somewhere, because that is a huge part of this. It's something that, a product that's grown on site, and that's part of our agritourism. And it sounds like you intend to do that, but there's no reference either in the PUD or on the concept plan. So I think you'd already addressed that. Entrance landscaping, I think, is important. I don't expect a entrance landscaping plan at this stage. I guess I'd just like a commitment that there would be some entrance landscaping that would be attractive. I don't know how you, if staff thinks that's an appropriate way to do it or not, but you say you're gonna do it, I just like to have something in it, because again, I think Noah will do this. I hope nobody else does, because I think he's got his heart in it, but it could be somebody else, and as you've told me before, an ordinance is written for the land, not the individual, so
Well,
I'd like to have.
the entrance idea came out of his mouth before anybody else brought it up,
Yeah.
so
if-
that's
if
his
it could
intention.
be-
yes.
Yeah, so if it could just be a commitment, I don't care to see a plan or details, but just a commitment that there would be.
There will be.
The one thing about animals, I don't know where they will be, but as you recall, a stable has to be 150 feet from the property line or 200 feet from the closest neighbor. So that would be something to think about when you're doing that. And I don't know if you plan on, the lawn area would seem like the most appropriate place to have those, at least the permanent residences, but accessory buildings 18 feet in height. What is the primary building and what are the accessory buildings on this site? I guess that's my question.
So
Because you have a 45-foot height restriction, and I assume that's
right.
on primary building.
The primary buildings are shown on, and it's actually principal building under your UDO, but
Okay.
they're shown on the
So
plan.
all of these are principal buildings?
They are.
Okay. What about the music center?
It-
Because I can't see that being 45 feet tall.
Yeah,
have an
I
issue.
think I'll defer to Pam, but I think that's an accessory building. The
Okay.
only reason it's shown there is because it's been touchy with the
Right.
plan commission, and so we just wanted to show how it's going to be oriented and where it's going to be located on
Right.
the property.
No, I get that.
Yeah.
And I think it's a good plan. I just want to make sure that, I don't know what we're calling primary and what we're calling accessory, and I want to get that straight when we go into this. So I don't know if staff needs to clarify that. We have 3 primaries and 1 accessory then, or I don't know how you handle that.
I think it's referred to as an accessory building.
Yes, so let me look at the title of that exhibit real quick. But just from a strictly definition standpoint, we do have definitions in our UDO of principal building and accessory building, which talk about in the principal building where the principal use of the property takes place, the principal building essentially. So if the principal use of that property is agritourism, I would not consider a music shelter a principal building because agritourism doesn't occur in it. It's an accessory portion of the use, so it's an accessory building
Right,
that houses it.
okay.
So from that aspect, yes, it would be an accessory building strictly by definitions. They do have a separate exhibit for music shelter, and let me pull that exhibit up.
Right, and I had a question on that one too. Those are very attractive areas. You have the shelters and then the two music areas. They appear to be smaller than 500 square feet, so I wanted to talk about that. I don't know what the current one is behind Urban Vines, but I'm sure it's not 20 by 25. Not that I have an issue, I just want us to understand what we're looking at and what's in writing.
And it's just a maximum size. It's not, doesn't mean it's gonna be built that size.
Okay. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, I mean, it's a zoning requirement, not a
Right, I just,
it's not a minimum requirement.
yeah, it's just that it's gonna be bigger than the two that you've shown us, I think. And that's all I'm pointing out. I wanted to make sure that everybody understood that.
That's not the intention. I mean,
No, I know.
this is the thematic style and
Right.
architecture and materials, so.
Okay. The animals in the statement that you wrote, not in the PUD, but in a statement that you wrote, you said there'd be 24-hour surveillance.
Mhm.
I don't know if that's important enough to put in the ordinance. I understand, I live in the country, we have animals. I'm not there 24 hours a day, but there is somebody on site at least most of the time during the day and night. I don't know if the Connor Prairie thing could be incorporated as an addition, not part of the PUD, maybe as, I don't know what we
Yeah,
do with that.
they use cameras for the most part,
Okay.
for overnight.
Right.
And when there's an animal that needs care, then somebody stays
Okay.
with it if it's sick or
I'm not as
something.
concerned about the animals, because,
Yeah.
again, nobody's gonna let an animal out there dwindle and starve or be in a bad condition.
And it will be seen if that were to happen.
That's right. Would you mind putting on your concept plan that this is to scale?
Sure, yes.
Is that a problem with staff?
Is there a scale on it?
It doesn't say, I don't think it had anything, at least not in the one in the ordinance.
Uh,
But if
it-
it's to scale, that would be helpful.
It is to scale, so yes, we can do that.
Okay. The other thing on the concept plan, as long as we're looking at it, the 3 rows of newly planted apple trees, there's really only 2 1/3, so I'm assuming that 3rd row will be planted sometime.
Say that again.
There are only 2 1/3 rows of apple trees planted.
In,
right?
in front of
Yeah.
the vines, yes,
Yeah, so they're
we will,
Gonna be 3, yeah, okay.
I'll figure that.
I just wanted to point it out so we didn't run into it later.
And we are required to build in substantial compliance with
Right.
this, so.
Which areas will be open to the general public? I know the cidery will. Will the winery or the seed building, other than outside
So,
sales?
well, they'll all be public structures, because they will employ people, and there may be people that come in for tours, so
Okay.
it's really hard to say, but they're probably all, at some time or another, will have members of the public in them.
Okay, so will they have to go through the state, whatever it is?
Design release.
CDR,
Yes.
yeah.
Yep, everything, yep.
Okay,
That's when I said that they will have to have permits in hand whenever you
right,
do mechanical work or beyond, I forget what the minimum amount is, like drywall
Right.
redo for commercial structures, then you have to go through that
right,
process.
okay. I'm just learning that, so
That's
why I was
okay.
asking more for just education.
No, these are public occupancy through and through.
There's a mound along Spring Mill, are you gonna keep that? I'm assuming you will. There's an existing mound of dirt and grass? It's not on there, and I just,
Oh,
oh, it's
yeah.
not even, it's not part of yours,
So,
okay,
yeah, Public Works can answer that.
okay,
I-
all right.
I didn't, I guess I've been out there, I just didn't.
What else? I'll try to be quick. I understood the part about a non-conforming use being the overhead doors.
Yeah.
So that was, I understand that, that's fine.
Yeah, if we can reasonably comply with any of those we will, but I mean, I'm sure there's an issue on the vines.
Well, I think that's it for now, so I'll pass it on to the next person.
Thank you, and that next person is Victor McCarty.
Oh, boy. So I too just want to echo a thank you for the simplification of everything. It truly helps. Try to compile my thoughts here, my notes. So just one clarification first off is because on the redesign of the main Vine building, you have urban apples, but then on the concept of rendering itself, it says urban farmer. So with the monument signs that you're wanting to construct, will it say urban farmer or will it say urban apples? I'm just alluding to what I mentioned before of having a whole campus feel, because you have a cidery, a vine, a seed. It feels like a farm, especially if animals. But with the urban apples, I just wanted to differentiate there.
And it may actually end up being something like urban acres, something more.
Oh, that'd be perfect, yeah. Love that.
But that's in process.
Okay, yeah. No, I love that name, so that's perfect. Really fits on the theming. And then that kind of fuels into my next question on, is the intent still to keep the current urban vines structure or to completely move all the facilities out to this location?
Yeah, the existing urban vines will stay.
Okay. Then yeah, that just went into my next thought of, I'm really happy with all the parking spots because drove by within the past week, and I mean, you go by at night and there's nowhere to park at all. So I think that will really be beneficial in the future. I already believed that this was a highly needed agritourism use in the area, considering, we got West Fork whiskey and hopefully more in the future. But after attending an event at the Cambria on Saturday night and seeing all the activity from the parents of the athletes there at Grand Park and just sitting in the lobby, I was like, man, we really need more nightlife activity opportunity out here at Grand Park area. So I think this will really feed into that and really help that need. Number one issue I just heard from neighbors living in the area is making sure the volume levels are kept in check, and of course that will adhere to the ordinances that we have. And I think you guys adding there in the concept plan next to the music shelter, between the pond and the music shelter, you have that row of trees or other greenery that's going to be, so that'll help with the buffering there. Yeah, I won't talk too much because we've already had a lot of points mentioned, but just wrap it up by saying that I appreciate the wanting to keep the existing structures and improving those, because again, just as someone who's lived there my entire life, and I'm looking at Google Maps right now, so comparing to what's there currently to this rendering, I think that'll just be beautiful, so really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Andre, Maui?
Yeah, thank you. So Victor just shed light on something I was going to say, actually, in response to Mr. John's comments, which was, sometimes the old buildings, we fight and fight and fight to keep them, and sometimes we just want to tear them down. And whichever way you guess, you're probably going to win with some and lose with others, because we all have a differing opinion on what's historic and what's just old. I don't have the same concern that this won't be a good product or condition after it's done, because I think you put $10 million into this site with all the improvements, and it's going to be good looking, and you do get to keep the old structures. So that may be something, even though it's perhaps a little bit beyond planning and land use, that maybe, who's the architect? Peterson? Maybe Peterson's done an assessment or something that maybe you could help some people feel better about what the condition would be after these enhancements. I appreciate the level of planning, the extent of effort that's gone into this since the last time we saw it. It's, I'm sure, a combination of maybe some lessons learned at your other site and us pushing. And I like things like the hard parking and the fact that the parking is interior, so as you approach it, you still see the agricultural look. It doesn't look like you're driving up to a county fair that you have to go through the sea of parking to get back into the actual functions, the programming and so forth. I like that. You mentioned the signs. Actually, we've talked about the signs a little bit here, so my feedback on that is I agree with your presentation comments that those break up some of those facades where they're strategically placed on the gables, kind of like the, what do you call them, the barn quilts or whatever that you see to kind of take that large expanse of red and break it up a little bit. So I think it's appropriate. It doesn't feel like it gives it a overwhelmingly, you know, textual or something. They're still kind of graphic in nature, like logos or whatever, and I think it's not over commercialized if it's done tastefully the way it's shown. That's my opinion. I like the architectural enhancements. Obviously, they're a very traditional agricultural look, which makes sense for this theme. Something that I didn't notice the first couple times I looked at this until this evening when it was on larger screen. Could we go to the Vine building rendering? When I started focusing on this, thank you right there, I was looking at the elevations and this didn't jump out at me, but then tonight when this rendering was up there briefly, I like the masonry water table. I don't like the abrupt change at the corner of the east facade right there. And I think it does the same thing on the north elevation as well. I think that you lose that impression of a stone foundation with a building on it, which is typically the intended look or what we're trying to mimic there. And instead it looks faux, or maybe I could go so bold as to say tacky when you have that abrupt change. So I may draw the ire of some of my peers here. I'd rather have like 6 inches more masonry all the way around than 10 extra feet on one facade. And others may disagree with that, I don't know. Or if it's gonna be higher on the front facades, or I should say east and north facades, maybe it steps down when it reaches that corner instead of dropping down right at the corner. If you do need to level it out in order to avoid that appearance and it drops below those east windows, you could put shutters to enhance those or something just so you don't have such a clear tacked on masonry at one elevation and then it stops at the corner. I just don't care for that particular look. Something I didn't see when I was looking at the elevations. And that's everything I noted here. That's all I've got. Thank you.
Thank you. I was very pleased that 7 areas became 4 and that we lost a ton of unique definitions to this PUD. So you came in with some excellent changes. Tonight's dialogue has actually been pretty helpful to me on some of the things that I came in with as far as concerns, the non-conforming conditions. I'm going to like to have another example or two of what it is that really fits that area so we can get a better understanding of how open we are making this non-conforming allowance to continue. I remain kind of concerned about signs along the roads having multiple monuments. The layout certainly makes it appear that there is really one primary entrance and that the other one is only a very secondary entrance. And I would think for traffic flow, trying to make everybody understand you get to me here and not have too many turns crossing traffic on Spring Mill Road by focusing on multiple entrances. So I think the north entrance needs to have very subdued or secondary signing if it has anything at all, and maybe it's just an exit. And yeah, serves entrance and exit would be a better way of controlling the ins and outs and the amount of signing required to make that happen effectively and safely. Andre, I think it was, just made the comment about building signs that I agree that very large expanses of any material, whether it's platinum or balsa wood, need to have something to break them up, but it doesn't have to have letters and be something you read as much as it's just something graphic and interesting, the reference to quilts and such. We visit a Shaker village every fall. They have a tree of life. It shows up in a lot of places. A Shaker tree of life is a great thing to see on a building. It fills an area, it's interesting, but it doesn't qualify, it doesn't really impress you as a sign. So I think we need to drill a little deeper there, but I'm favorably impressed with the progress that we've made. Those are the remaining highlights. Dr. Keller has indicated she has additional thoughts to share, and then I'll ask if anybody else, because this has been going on for a while, if any other folks to my left where all this started have evolved into additional comments they'd like to raise.
Matt, how close are you to that's going to be where the pond is? I assume you've looked at the site long enough.
I apologize, I can't hear
Oh,
you.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I'm sorry. How sure are you that's going to be where the pond is?
We're pretty sure.
Okay.
This is an informed concept plan.
Okay.
I mean, our site engineer has laid it out. That's an approximate size.
Right.
It might have to get a little bigger or smaller,
Right,
but
but it's not going to be in the middle now or someplace else.
that's
as
where it
far as
wants to
you know.
be.
Okay.
That's where
what
it
I
wants to
thought.
be.
The one other thing and I agree with Andre around about the appearance, and that's a personal thing, but, you know, the big on the front and then side almost looks like one of those homes in a subdivision that has a facade, and then, so, you know, but that's personal
The-
taste, so I'm not gonna
I
judge
think
you
the
on that.
architect was trying to anticipate a plan commission request, so you're actually doing the opposite of what he.
He went above and beyond, and now he can go back down again.
Yeah.
The one thing that I did have an issue with, and I forgot to bring up earlier, was the 5-year not putting landscaping along the edges. And it's only the foundation plantings that you want the 5-year
Correct.
extension on.
And it's only along, the areas
And it's
that,
only along which area? Because you have expansions
here,
on
I'll show you.
a couple.
Oh, I about zapped myself. Here.
So you have an
So,
expansion,
so right here,
yeah,
right here, and right here. This will be an addition, this will be a patio. There's some portions of these patios could be covered patios or pergola, covered
Right.
patios.
right.
And so there will probably be containerized plants and things that will rotate in and out of there, but it's unlikely if you put foundation plantings in those areas that they would survive
Okay.
for very long.
Would you, but on Spring Mill Road especially, on the east side of this property, there's a winery building that has 2 sides facing Spring Mill, basically.
Here,
You are
here.
going to do the foundation plantings there. That wasn't exempt? Because the way it was written, I got the impression all of the foundation plantings were exempt.
So rather than embarrass myself, can you explain how foundation plantings work when there's vehicular areas? Or at least how it's been applied?
Yeah, because you have some along that eastern
Yeah,
portion of the.
we can do it
winery.
there.
Which facade are we asking specifically about?
She's probably asking about this specifically because there's a garage,
There's a garage there.
yeah.
Yeah,
So-
and the one to the north, going north-south of the
Okay.
winery building. We are going to have foundation plantings there before 5 years.
They're required.
Yeah,
yes.
that would go in when they submit a detailed development plan for improvements to that building, or a building permit for improvements to that building.
Okay.
And the foundation plantings, if there are elements that prohibit them in certain areas, the UDO does allow them to be clustered, such as for doors, overhead doors, so they can provide, we'll take the measurement, they're required to have X number of trees along that facade, and they're allowed to cluster them in areas to
Right,
accommodate
Right,
openings.
okay. I just want to make sure we aren't 5 years out and we still don't have any plantings along Spring Mill Road, along those buildings there.
It should only be those, the areas where there are additions. That's the only place exempted
Okay,
in the
Okay,
ordinance.
thank you.
Yeah.
Is 5 years really the absolute requirement, you feel, or it just seems like that is a very long time?
Well, it's a standard that you've been comfortable with before, and we expect that if we are going to do these additions, we'll do them by then. It
So-
could be before that.
Yeah, just to clarify, if the additions are completed before 5 years, the plantings would be planted at that time. It's just, if
Concurrent
5
with
years
those.
come and there's no addition, they have to do the plantings at that time without the addition.
While we were talking, I was looking at some of the various resources that we have in front of us here. And in the question that Dr. Keller asked about pond location, I had meant to ask this earlier myself. There is an existing pond pretty much smack dab in the middle of the place. water likes to go where water likes to go.
Yeah,
It's hard to really tell it to go somewhere where it doesn't want to go. We know for sure that, and it's kind of obvious by looking at where you can see flow in adjacent properties, that there probably is a low spot there, so it's probably going to be an okay location for it. But we can make the one in the middle go away.
Yeah, it really doesn't want to be there.
Okay.
It's being
That was
forced,
more of
it's
a
being
forced
forced to
thing.
be there, yes.
Okay. Okay,
Well,
I didn't know.
Either that or it was just convenient. I mean, you know, how it, it might have been cheaper to just dig a hole there than somewhere else. But the site itself, developed, wants to drain to where we're showing it.
Okay. Looking back to my left again, dialogue's gone on for some period of time. Does anybody to my left here have any additional comments that have come to mind that they would like to bring up? Mike, none? David, none? None? Anybody else back this way?
Just briefly to echo those around me, agreeing with you, Commissioner Jorge, that only having one monument sign just to ease the flow of traffic in that main entrance and using the secondary entrance as a service entrance or whatever it may be, using it for special events. And then agreeing with Maui on the brick facade, because when you look at Google Maps, the street view, with that rendering and the trees being planted in front of it, you would hardly even see the huge brick facade anyway. So I would even go as far as just having that 6 foot or however tall wrap around the entire building instead of one huge to help a brick facade to help with the breakaway. But that's just my opinion on that. And that's all I have.
All right, thank you. This item is in front of us tonight for a recommendation to City Council. Are we all comfortable with what we have heard and the to-do list that Matt has been making for himself over there, that all of those things will come together in time for a council recommendation, or do we have a concern that we would like to see this back in front of us again? You look like you were anxious to say something.
Yeah. I think we've made a lot of progress tonight. I think there are changes to be made that I think you're willing to do, modify some things. I know staff hates it when we give them a list of 5 conditions that go along with something. So I personally would just as soon see some of these things taken care of and come back to us with a, for sure, we're good then. But what does staff think?
Yeah, we're good.
Thank you.
You'll come back again?
Yeah.
That is much appreciated, because this was going to be a really tough motion to make.
Yeah.
So we'll shoot for coming back in 2 weeks
Yeah.
if we can pull everything together.
Okay, perfect. And it occurred to me while we were sitting here and I played with another toy, you can get different generations of aerial maps on the GIS. The pond appeared in 2009. It was not there in 2008.
Anything else for me?
So I think we have roughed you up enough. Appreciate your time, and we look forward to hearing from you again and make it a whole lot quicker and more successful out the door for you. Okay.
Thank you, guys.
Next 3 items in front of us tonight are all public hearing items. First one is the Orchard View Plat Amendment, 2110-ODP-23 and 2110-SPP-23.
Good evening, excuse me. Good evening, members of the commission. For the record, Dane Crabtree with the Community Development Department. The item before you this evening is the amended primary plan and overall development plan for Orchard View. As you may recall, an additional 3 acres of real estate was added to the Orchard View PUD at the March 8th, 2021 City Council meeting. As such, the previously approved primary plat and overall development plan for Orchard View requires an amendment to include said acreage, which adds 8 additional single-family residential lots and rights-of-way. This item is scheduled for a public hearing this evening. The department has received no comments after being properly noticed and advertised. If neither the public nor Plan Commission have any concerns and are satisfied with the proposed overall development plan and primary plat, the department recommends approval with the condition listed in the staff report, as the plans are compliant with both the PUD and the UDO. Sean Downey with Arbor Homes is present this evening, though he does not plan to make a presentation. He is available for questions, as am I if there are questions of staff. Thank you.
Thank you. Quick polling of whether or not there are any questions or comments from the commission? Oh, yeah, I guess we'll go ahead and do the public hearing first. We normally do that. We will open a public hearing on this at 8:14. Do we have any cards?
We do not have any cards.
Anybody that may be attending virtually, we'll hold for just a couple of minutes for you to email planners@westfield.in.gov with the petition numbers in the subject line if there are any comments that you would like to make on this. It is now 8:17. If there hasn't been an email received, I will go ahead and close the public hearing. We are closed. Now, quickly, any commissioner comments, starting with Dave Schmitz?
None for me, thanks.
Thank you. Matt Deck?
None for me.
Excellent. Dr. Kelleher?
None for me.
Thank you. Victor McCarty?
None for me, thank you.
Perfect. Andre Maui?
None here?
Circling back, Mike Johns?
None here?
Excellent. I too have none. In the absence of a comment from anybody, do we have a motion to go ahead and forward this along with the recommended approval from staff?
Kelleher here. I will make a motion to approve primary plat and overall development plan 2110-SPP-23 and 2110-ODP-23 with the staff conditions that all necessary approvals be obtained from the Public Works Department and the Hamilton County Surveyor's Office prior to the issuance of an improvement location permit.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion from Dr. Kelleher, a second from Dave Schmitz. Will staff please call the roll?
Can I take that back?
Oh, did you?
It's 2109 ODP 23 and 2108 SPP-23. I'd moved on to Hiddled already.
These are the correct numbers right here. It seems that the ones on the agenda may have been misprinted, but
Yeah,
the staff report is correct.
Yeah, those are the ones for the next one, I think.
On the next,
Or that's the right one?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, then I'm totally confused.
And they are on our
Oh.
printed agenda.
It's on the printed agenda wrong then.
It's on the screen wrong.
It's on the screen. Okay,
Yes.
whatever. It's Orchard
It's on
View that I'm
something.
making my
So,
motion on.
The motion is for the correct item numbers, and it's to approve. It's been moved by Dr. Keller and seconded by Dave Schmitz, so we're ready for a roll call from staff.
Mr. Horke,
Yes.
Mr. Johns,
Yes.
Dr. Kelleher,
Yes,
Mr. Maui,
Yes.
Mr. McCarty,
Yes.
Mr. Schmitz,
Yes.
Mr. Deck.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Excellent. Item next is Hiddle at 31 PUD Amendment Number 1. Item 2110-PUD-24.
Good evening, members of the commission. For the record, Dane Crabtree with the Community Development Department. The item before you this evening is a proposed amendment to the Hiddle at 31 PUD, specifically Lot 2 of the PUD, which is generally located at the southwest corner of US 31 and 191st Street. The proposal is requesting to allow Drivet custom brick as a permitted building material in place of architectural insulated panels. In addition, the amendment proposes to replace Exhibit D2 of the original PUD, which showed elevations for a La Quinta Inn and Suites, with a new hotel character exhibit. This item is scheduled for a public hearing this evening. It has been properly noticed and advertised, and the department has received no comments. John Dabashewitz of Nelson and Frankenberger is present on behalf of the petitioner to give a brief presentation, after which he will be available for questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. For the record, John Dabashewitz, land use professional with the law firm Nelson and Frankenberger. We represent the petitioner, Priam Pa. Present tonight on behalf of the petitioner is Sunny Patel and Jim Schinnemer, an attorney with our office. As noted, the matter before the Planning Commission this evening is a public hearing for an amendment to the Hiddle at 31 PUD. Specifically, the amendment pertains to permitted building materials as they apply to one of the two proposed hotels, the subject building within Area 2 of the PUD. The exhibit that I asked staff to pass around is an example of the finished exterior material that's proposed for the building. The subject real estate is outlined in yellow and area now on display. The subject parcel is approximately 5.5 acres and is located generally at the southwest corner of US 31 and 191st Street. The applicant proposes to construct a new Holiday Inn Express and Suites on the real estate as one of the two future hotels. While a hotel is a permitted use on the real estate, the applicant has filed the request which seeks two approvals. One, a change in the building design included in the character exhibits to the illustrations which include the Holiday Inn Express and Suites, which is on display here. Previously, the building design reflected a La Quinta hotel, which is no longer proposed. Secondly, the applicant proposes to use Drivet custom brick, the example of that material currently making its way through the Plan Commission members, as an exterior material on the building rather than architectural insulated panels and or ceramic panels as permitted today. The UDO defines architectural insulated panels as, in quotes, an insulated metal panel with an insulated core and exterior face finished to simulate stucco or other high-quality exterior materials, the operative word there being metal. The applicant is seeking approval to use Drivet custom brick in order to provide an exterior finish that will simulate brick masonry rather than the appearance of stucco typical of architectural insulated panels. Unlike architectural insulated metal panels, the Drivet custom brick is an on-site applied finish that emulates masonry, reduces structural demands, creates sharp, deeper grout lines, and will provide a natural texture and color to the building exterior. These are a comparison. I apologize, I didn't advance the slide. The area highlighted in yellow are those characteristics that I just described. These are a couple of photographs and slides that depict the use of the Drivet custom brick at the Grant Park Event Center, this area that has the appearance of masonry. This is a Courtyard by Marriott, which is in downtown Fort Wayne, right there next to their convention center. This area here is that Drivet custom brick material in that setting. A couple other examples that are more local. Pearson Ford use that material on their collision center, which is at 106th Michigan Road, and then an extra space storage facility. Utilize that material in Indianapolis on this first level. Today, architectural insulated panels are permitted by right on 60% of the subject building. The drive-it custom brick will occupy that same space, no more than 60% of the building exterior. The applicant is simply seeking to substitute the brick look that can be achieved with the drive-it custom brick desired on the Holiday Inn Express and Suites for the more stucco embossed finish look of the architectural metal panel that were planned for the La Quinta Inn. As illustrated here, the architectural metal panel typically has a factory applied stucco finish. So this is an example of one of those panels that's used in a building design, which there's a photograph of here. And the drive-it custom brick finish, as illustrated in this photograph and the information provided to the Planning Commission for consideration from the manufacturer, of course emulates a brick finish, and is applied in the field. And that's the example that I passed around. Of course, that's a small area, but you get more relief along that in terms of the grout lines, and then a custom color and texture that's applied in the field rather than a factory applied finish. Again, the architectural metal panel on this side of the exhibit, and then the drive-it custom brick over here. This is really a change that's precipitated or predicated based upon the change in the potential end user. The La Quinta Inn had a architectural metal panel design, and this design that is preferred by the end user is more of a brick look and finish. In conclusion, we've reviewed the request with staff, and staff are supportive of the request, but we're unable to approve the material administratively based on the UDO definition, again, the operative word there being metal, as reviewed this evening, and therefore the applicant is before the Planning Commission with the proposed PUD amendment. The applicant believes that the proposed material is of compatible quality with the current permitted exterior materials and is therefore an appropriate alternative. We appreciate your time tonight and be available for any questions. After tonight's meeting, we would come back to the Planning Commission at a future date with the expectation of receiving a recommendation onto the City Council. With that, I'll conclude and again be glad to address any questions the Commission may have.
Thank you. This item does require a public hearing, and I'll open that hearing at 8:27. Are there any cards?
I have no cards or emails at this time.
Okay. Once again, to the virtual attendees, whoever they may be, if there is a comment that you would like to make, planners@westfield.in.gov. It's 8:27. We'll hold open till 8:29 to see if there are any further comments. It is now 8:29. In the absence of a fresh email from somebody with a comment, we will close the public hearing. Are there any commissioner comments about any of this, starting with Matt Deck?
No comments.
Thank you. Dr. Keller?
Two comments. I didn't have a chance to go to a building supply store and look at this in more detail. I appreciate your bringing the sample. when I look at most of the examples of where it's used, there are two things that stand out to me. It's not used all the way to the ground, and there's usually some masonry at the lower level below it. And there are lots of, I don't know if this is the proper term, offsets, where there are things that bump out and then go back in. So the building itself is pretty much straight and flat, I mean, with a little bit of relief, but not as much. When I look at the other Marriott, Courtyards by Marriott that you showed, it had a lot more offsets. It was in your presentation slide, I think. One of those is there, the Courtyard by Marriott. So I guess there are two things. If I were to consider it, and I need to go look at it, it's basically EFS. The fact that they call it brick is a little concerning, but I realize that's a sales thing. It's not brick, it's EFS, and it has the same issues from what little research I could do is EFS, which is moisture and things, which is probably why it doesn't go all the way to the ground in a lot of these exhibits. And the Courtyard by Marriott has a lot more, again, offsets and details, which I think for this material is probably better because the fewer seams and things, the less chance there is moisture to get in. So those are my two concerns.
Thank you. Victor McCarty?
Pretty much just that number one feedback I hear from people who visit Grant Park is that they wish there were more hotels available in the immediate area. So I think this would be welcome in terms of design-wise. I agree with Ginny a little bit of just having some more offsets, if you will. But I think it's a welcome change as opposed to what it would have been. Did I write anything else down? I think that is all. So thank you.
Thank you. Andre Maui?
I think everybody here knows my typical disdain for EFS, and you're right, that's basically what this is. On the other hand, trying to be open-minded, it is, as far as I can tell, it's an improved EFS, and so I was trying to determine the extent to which it's been improved. I still think absolutely it should not go to the ground, although I don't think from the elevations that it was being proposed all the way to the ground. I'd have to go back and look at that. I think it was higher up. I think you had a different material down low. And Dr. Kelleher, actually it's, and architects might tell us otherwise, but typically what I've seen is the offsets are actually where you get more opportunities for leaks. The flat panels, the straight, ugly facades are easier to keep sealed than when they make those corners and the offsets and insets. That's usually where the problems occur most, and then at the ground level as well. I was trying to find and did not yet, so maybe this would be something you could provide for us. Like what is the typical, and we can stick with Drive It as a brand name, so it's apples to apples. The Drive It spec for their typical EFS, non-custom brick EFS, their regular stucco look EFS, versus the thickness that's being proposed here. I did see that it's available in different thicknesses, the polymer modified, whatever the application is. And then also, I know EFS used to be, and I'm not sure if it's changed everywhere now, expanded polystyrene, like the beadboard was the insulation component of that finish system, whereas the sample that came around was the extruded polystyrene, which is more rigid. And I didn't know if that was for the sample or if that's what goes on, again, without seeing an actual spec for what's going in here. So as a matter of appearance, I think the stuff is incredible. I mean, they've really gotten it to where it looks like a brick facade. My concern is not what does it look like on opening day. It's what does it look like on year 10 and 15, and that's where I'm still trying to get more data, and you might be able to help with a little bit more. The brochure gave us some, but I'm still trying to get some more specs on that. That was it, thanks.
Thank you. Going back to my left, Mike Johns.
Yeah, John, I would echo what Andre said, and also what Jenny said, and if there's any way you can get us some more information on the product itself. As you know, my background is in real estate, and with all the bad press that EFS has had over the years, I always try to guide my residential clients away from EFS. And it's, I mean, and most people, most realtors do. Many of our clients do. If you're working with a Lilly client, you're not allowed to even show them a house that has EIFS on it. Their company says we will not we don't want our employees purchasing houses with EIFS. So I've got that preconception as to EIFS. So this looks like a new product, but I'm also concerned with water intrusion and what's going to look like in 10 years. So whatever information you can provide would be helpful.
Thank you. Dave Schmitz?
Nothing additional beyond what's been said, thanks.
Thank you. Did you have another thought that you wanted to share, Dr. Kelleher?
Just in the presentation materials, it said a life cycle of 30 years, which doesn't seem very long. I don't,
And that's to put on notice the end user that there's a maintenance obligation.
yeah, that was a red flag for me, so.
That just sparked a question, if I may, real quick. Does the current Holiday Inn in Westfield, well, I guess kind of two questions. One, will that Holiday Inn still be here, having two Holiday Inns? But then also, the second question is, does the current Holiday Inn have that EIFS? Because I know just with that building being here for, almost 20 years now, you can kind of start to see a wear and tear on that. So I didn't know if that would be comparable.
We'll look into both those questions. I don't have an answer on the existing hotel, whether that would change a brand. And I believe there's some EIFS on that building, but again, we're talking about a material and an age that's different than the material that we're talking about today. It's a custom surface applied finish. So there's the initial when you lay up the material, and then there's a stencil, and they cut in the area with the grouting, and they cut in the area with the brick, which is a material that has an integral color to it. So it's not going to fade over time like a factory applied panel where you might get some variation between those different panels where it would be noticeable. This is a material that has an integral dye to it that'll weather over time and not show fading like you would normally think of. But we'll get more information on that. I know Dr. Keller had a comment about the area at the bottom. Along with this building, it's still 33% masonry. So we'll see if some adjustments can be made to keep it at a reasonable level above grade so that it's not down at the bottom. So you're dealing with those issues like you would along the building base in terms of maintenance or it being hit rather than that. And then the bump outs, we'll look at that as well as the age of the material, some more information we can provide the commission for its review on how this material weathers over time.
And John, like we did with vinyl years ago, Andre mentioned there were different apparently grades or thicknesses. We didn't allow vinyl for a long time, and now we occasionally do, but it's usually a more thick, so it doesn't wave and weave. So since I know very little about this material, since I just found out about this Thursday, I'll do more research, but if there is a difference in grades or thicknesses, and that would be important to know, I think, too.
Absolutely.
Okay. I'm familiar with this to some degree as well, and appreciate what Andres brought up, that you can over-detail something and build yourself in a problem. I would like to think that the manufacturer has figured out enough of this that those kinds of details, which are important to the aesthetics, don't become a maintenance headache. If this is in too large of a sheet, it has, in some of the applications I'm familiar with, you can see where these things have joined after a number of years. So hopefully this is good sizes, it appears to be, so I'd like others here to see a little additional information, but I'm inclined to think this is something that probably warrants consideration here. So look forward to having you back, and we'll get this finalized.
Okay. Thanks for your time this evening.
Absolutely. Last public hearing on our agenda this evening is Midland South PUD Amendment 1, 2110-PUD-25.
Thank you. Good evening, members of the commission. For the record, Rachel Remenschneider with the Community Development Department. This is an amendment to the Midland South PUD, which was originally forwarded for recommendation and adopted in April of this year. The property is approximately 3.37 acres at the northwest corner of Cherry Street and Roosevelt Street. This item is introduced at the September 13th City Council meeting and is asking for both a public hearing and a recommendation this evening. It has been properly noticed and advertised, and staff has not received any public comment. The petitioners held a neighbor meeting on Wednesday, September 29th, and the notes for that are in your exhibits. Ed Hamilton of Apollo Developers is here tonight to make a brief presentation. He's available for questions, as am I, if there are any for staff. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Ed Hamilton, Apollo Developers, with the business address of 12941 Coyote Run, Fishers, Indiana, 46038. We'll keep it really brief. We're here on behalf of All Town Design Group. We appreciate the consideration of staff to move this for a vote tonight and to make the recommendation for that. This is purely an administrative action. This was an administrative error we had in the ordinance that we had listed the height of the buildings at 35 feet. The actual design is 39 and a half feet. The elevations you see are the same elevations that were presented to you at the zoning approval. And there are no changes in the site plan either. So this is the only change we're asking, is to get that 35-foot number corrected to 39 and a half feet. Thank you very much.
Thank you. This does require a public hearing, which I will open at 8:41. Probably don't have any cards, do we?
No cards or
Nor
emails.
emails.
No cards or emails, thank you.
If there is a virtual attendee that would like to comment, planners@westfield.in.gov. Please type quickly. Close the public hearing at 8:43 if we do not receive anything further. It is now 8:43, so in the absence of an email, we will close the public hearing. Without polling individuals, since there's, I suspect, not many comments. Does anybody have any concerns about this? And if not, do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion for favorable recommendation
Thank you.
for 2110-PD-25.
I will second.
Thank you. We have a motion from Victor McCarty, second from Dr. Kelleher. Will staff please call the roll?
Dr. Kelleher?
Yes?
Mr. Maui?
Yes.
Mr. McCarty?
Yes.
Mr. Schmitz?
Yes.
Mr. Deck?
Yes.
Mr. Horkay?
Yes.
Mr. Johns?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. I hope you enjoyed the meeting up to your quick agenda item here. Thank you for coming. That concludes our business for this evening. All other items on the agenda are continued to a future date, with the one withdrawn item that will either not come back or require refiling before it does.
Just for clarification real quick on that withdrawn, is that the property across from the PAC Pacers Athletic Center?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
That takes us to reports and comments. Are there any comments from Plan Commission members? In the absence of Cindy Spoljarek, does Mike Johns have a council liaison update for us?
Yeah, real quick, council meeting last week, we approved a tax abatement for the Wrights Group, which is the old Ninja Zone in their facility there at Grand Park. We also approved a additional appropriation for the library. The library budget was introduced, and that will be up for approval at our next council meeting on October 11th. And we also discussed the city budget, which will be up for adoption at our next meeting on the 11th. And we also had introduced a tax abatement for Ortho Indy project. So, that was it.
Okay. There is actually on the city website a council meeting for tomorrow morning.
It's called a council meeting. It really is our
Work session.
finance committee meeting, and
Yeah.
it's kind of a workshop. It will be the finance
Budget
committee meeting
focused.
with a workshop. It's noticed as a council meeting so that all the councilors can attend. So, but that'll
Okay.
be tomorrow morning here at 9 o'clock.
Very good. I don't believe there was a BZA meeting in between last meeting and now, so no report there. Staff, do we have comments from staff?
Yeah, no updates here. We keep moving along.
Keep moving along. All right, excellent. That concludes our business. Do we have a motion to
Real-
adjourn?
Real quick, I'm sorry to keep us here just one
We're
more
not
minute.
through quite yet.
But just seeing that withdrawn for the Grand Park Village PUD amendment, it just sparked a thought. I visited Pigeon Forge over the summer, and they have a place called The Island, and they also have a sporting facility down there. And it's a great location for restaurants and entertainment, et cetera. So, any developer that's still listening I would just, we need something like that around Grand Park instead of continued housing developments. So that way we can really, as I mentioned earlier in the meeting, we need people visiting Grand Park need a place to go in terms of eating, entertainment, et cetera. And I think that would just be a great addition to the Grand Park campus, so.
Kristen would echo your thoughts.
Yeah, and just real quickly, the Woods Robinson Briggs PUD, the island specifically was a little bit of the inspiration for some of the concepts in that project. So, yep, it's been already used as something to mimic or bring here.
Perfect, thank you.
All right. Now, are we ready for a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
I have a motion from Victor McCarty and a second from Dr. Kelleher. Everybody in favor? Aye?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? We are adjourned at 8:47.